now we're going to move to Mr. Rusty Turner, who is the editor of the Northwest Arkansas Democrat-Gazette and has had a long 38-year career in journalism. He's been a sports writer, a reporter, an editor in newspapers in Rogers, Arkansas, but has always stood for transparency, and looking very forward to hearing Mr. Turner's talk on the media and FOIA. And he's going to be on by Zoom.
Go ahead.
All right, we're good.
I can. Can you guys hear me?
Perfect. Yes, sir.
Okay, great. Great. Well, thank you for inviting me to be part of this. I really appreciate the time, and I always enjoy the opportunity to talk about the importance of the Freedom of Information Act and just in general transparency in government and why it's so important. I also want to thank the people responsible for this conference, Transparency in Government. I really do admire and appreciate your commitment to helping keep our government, our local governments, and our state government transparent and open and accessible to the public. That's something we as journalists, it's the value that we as journalists share with you, not just because it makes it easier to do our jobs, but also, by the very nature of our jobs, we believe in it. We believe that our communities are made better when our governments are accessible, when it's easy to get a hold of the information you'd like to have, and it's much easier to hold government accountable when you have all the information. So thank you again for your commitment and for your efforts to spread the word about transparency in government and why it's important. We in the media, we like to think of ourselves as a watchdog of government. We like to think of ourselves as as an institution that keeps an eye on things and alerts the public when they need to know, when something's going wrong, when something's not going well, when government needs to be held accountable. And you yourselves do that. It's not just the media's job, it's the citizens' job as well. So I'm happy to talk about this great tool that we have to help us all do that. And I think it was mentioned several times this morning when the FOI Coalition folks and the task force folks spoke, but I was listening in on that part of the program, and they all talked about how the Freedom of Information Act is sometimes perceived as a media law or a law for journalists, when I think we all of us know that it is a law for the people, that the people and our citizens, that protects them. It's not just a tool for journalists like nosy people like me who are always looking around corners and behind the doors. So I think often, because we in the media are the ones who are always in the ear of a public official, or always demanding this document or that document, or making or insisting that this meeting be open or that meeting is inappropriate. I think that's where a lot of the perception that it's a media law or it's a law for the benefit of the media comes from. But I don't have to tell you that it's a law that protects all of us. So it's important to keep that at the forefront of everything we do, that it's the people's law. And open government sunshine laws protect all people. And while media members like me may be part of the parade and fighting for it, it's not just us. For journalists, the FOI is a tool. It's something we use to accomplish our goal of telling readers what they want and need to know about their government, and helps us be that watchdog that fulfill that watchdog role that we think is so important. And if we do that well, if we can accomplish those goals by using the FOIA to get a hold of the right records, get a hold of the right documents, and tell the right stories, put them in the proper context, then that in turn helps those readers evaluate their government, whether it's working or not, and also helps them to decide whether to support or replace those we elect into government positions. So we're all working together toward the same end. Sometimes that gets a little adversarial with elected officials, but that's part of the it. As I'm sure you all know, I'm sure you all have run into situations where there's conflict. But from our perspective in journalism, it's important to know that it's not personal. That the information we're asking for, the documents we're asking for, the access we're asking for, we're doing so to accomplish a goal, and it has nothing to do with the personality or the person we're asking of that information. We are simply doing our jobs, looking out for the public, looking out for our readers, and trying to tell the truth in the best way possible. That's something we talk about a lot with our reporters, with our staff members, that even when you're in one of those confrontational or adversarial positions where you want a document, you know that document's disclosable and you're not getting it, it's important to remain professional and cordial but still be insistent about your rights to get the documents that you've asked for. And then at some point, you might have to take additional steps, whether that's engaging someone like Joey McCutcheon to represent you in court, or filing a criminal complaint if that's appropriate, or in my case as a journalist, telling our readers about an obstinate member of a government agency who's not providing documents that should be released. So we do have some, once we get to that point, we do have some options, but it's important to understand that a lot of the people we deal with in government, most of them want to do the right thing, they just don't understand the right thing. Most of the time when one of my reporters runs into a problem in getting documents, it's usually because my reporter, or our reporter, has more knowledge about what's disclosable than the custodian. And I think that's a real problem in a lot of local governments, is that they don't do a very good job sometimes educating their frontline folks about what's disclosable and what's not, what their obligations are under FOIA. And I think it's important that we do our best to let our elected officials know that's an important part of their jobs is to make government accessible, not just to the media, but to a citizen who just wants to find out what's happening in their government. It's important for them to understand that's part of the job and what their job responsibilities entail. Usually, you can show someone a passage in the FOI book, or you can explain what you're after, and you can get what you're after eventually. But as we all know too well, sometimes you also have to hit them with the FOI stick and take them to court. And that's, it's always best to avoid that step, but if you have to go that route, then you need to be willing to do it. I would also applaud you. I saw that Elizabeth Walker from the AG's office was on your program today. I think it's great that you've taken a lot of steps to educate yourselves about what the FOI can and can't do and what it does and doesn't do. And Elizabeth Walker is one of the best. I've seen her presentations many, many times. I always come away with something new, some new insight that helps us do a better job every time I hear her speak. So I applaud you for that. But I do think that's a consistent problem sometimes with folks who are looking for information, is they think the FOI does more than it actually does, or they don't really understand how FOI works. There's a woman in our community here who will has a habit of sending what she calls FOI requests to a local government, but it's basically just a long series of questions. How much did this cost? Who are the bidders on this project? That sort of thing. She's not really asking for documents, she's just asking for answers. And the FOI doesn't necessarily guarantee that you're going to get those answers. So it's important to know that when you're asking with a formal FOI request, that you're asking for the documents that are going to answer your questions, not just asking questions. And we've tried several times. She's often called us when she's been frustrated with her inability to get the information she wants, and we've tried to help her from time to time. But it's important to know how to use the law and how to open those doors and get the information that you're after. I I do want to spend, I know we've talked a lot about meetings and open meetings and what's a meeting and all that sort of thing. I do want to say that open meetings is just as important as the documents provisions of the FOIA. We make sure that our reporters know how to voice an objection if they happen to be attending a meeting that appears to be going wrong. And I think that's an important thing to know for your group as well. If you are at a meeting and it looks like an executive session is about to be convened for a reason not allowed, how to get that objection on the record. It's really important to know how to do that and do that appropriately. It's also important to do that professionally, and it will help your case if you can do it in a way that is respectful but insistent on getting your objection on the record. I do think that, and I think it was Neil Gladner earlier in the day who mentioned this, I do think that technology presents a whole new set of challenges. They're not so new anymore, I guess, but technology like texting, email, social media, communication apps, phone apps, things like that, make it much, much more difficult for all of us to be watchdogs on public meetings. You know, even here in Northwest Arkansas, where we've got pretty good media coverage of a lot of different governments, it's not unusual to, you know, see a member of a particular board texting across the table to another member of a particular board during the meeting. And that's very frustrating when you see that sort of thing happen. It's also very difficult to hold people accountable when you see that kind of thing happening. So that may be something we need to try to address legislatively about, you know, whether texts address specifically about those kinds of communication apps. Because if they're having a meeting within the meeting over digital phones, then it's they're defeating they have found another way to defeat the FOI, as Mr. Gladner said earlier. That's water getting into the cracks and trying to make it a little wider. So I'll be more than happy to answer any questions. Before I go, I do want to say, I don't know if they're still there, but I do want to say thanks to Representative Lowry, Representative Flowers, Senator Sullivan, and for their support of open government transparency legislation. That they were very important for us as journalists. I'm a member of the Arkansas Press Association Board of Directors. I was the president last year. Made several trips to Little Rock to testify against certain legislation, and it's very, very helpful when you have those kinds of people who feel the same way we do about transparency in government. I want to thank them. Also want to shout out to Representative Howard Beatty, who was very, very helpful to us, particularly in killing House Bill 1280, which was the one that would have allowed governments to go into executive session to discuss economic development. I think Wesley Brown talked about that earlier today too, and about what a bad bill that was. And I'm glad we were able to beat it back this time. And I fully expect to have to try to beat it back again 2 years from now, or a year and a half from now. So that kind of wraps up my prepared remarks. I'm more than happy to answer any questions that you have. I will say that you may have some questions about something I was involved in about 20 years ago. I was part of what I think has been the only statewide survey of the FOI and compliance of the FOI back in 1999. It was a consortium of newspapers that put together a survey where we went into all 75 counties looking for documents that we knew were disclosable under FOIA, just to see how compliant the state was in that. It was a pretty surprising. Some of the results were pretty surprising. We actually got some state laws and some state policies changed because of the lack of compliance in certain areas. But I'm happy to answer any questions about that as well if you've got them. So, Joey, if there are questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Do we have anybody have any questions? I'll ask one. I'd like to get your thoughts about, did you see my presentation and the bill that on open meetings? And I know you've probably seen versions of it in the past, and I'm wondering how you feel about that, and do you feel like that you know, when we don't have a consistent definition of meeting, that can cause problems on both sides, you know, from a transparency perspective, as well as, you know, our elected officials operating, not really knowing, a state of confusion.
Right. Yeah. You know, that is, as you know, Joey, that's one of the few areas where those of us in open government circles sometimes part company. I kind of like the idea of a firm definition of a meeting. It appeals to me because there are so many questions. It seems like it's with the definition of meeting being very vague the way it is. It just leaves the door open for lots of shenanigans and lots of mischief. So I personally think that is certainly something worth exploring, maybe setting that number at 2 or 3. I do understand those people who like it the way it is, who like it vague, because they feel like it keeps governments on their toes, and makes and can be kind of a deterrent to some of that mischief. I think that may be true in areas where there is a strong media presence or a strong transparency and government presence who are watching them all the time. I think in geographic areas where there's not a good local newspaper, a good local news outlet, or a strong group of government transparency folks, I think it does leave the door open. So I kind of lean toward a more firm definition of meeting. What constitutes a meeting? I think it would solve a lot of problems. At the same time, it doesn't solve them all, I guess is what I would say. So.
Okay, well, thank you so much. Let's give Mr. Turner a big round of applause. Thank you.